Hello and welcome to The Big Picture. I am Tina Jha. The second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic has been devastating for India, with the sudden rise in cases, the overburdening of our healthcare system that left people scrambling for hospital beds, essential medicines, and oxygen cylinders, to a spurt in daily deaths. The past few weeks have been extremely painful. Although the crisis is still far from over, the total number of confirmed infections closed in on 25 million on Sunday. There appears to be a glimmer of hope that the worst of the second wave of the pandemic could be over. Now, data shows the trajectory of new infections for the entire country appears to be showing signs of receding from a peak over the past week. So, for the first time since the start of the second wave, the number of active cases in the country reflect a downward trend. On Sunday, a total of 281,911 new cases were reported, which is the lowest in 27 days. In the week gone by, there were 328,947 new infections every day across the country on an average. And the week before, this number was close to 391,000, which is again the highest ever recorded since the outbreak of the pandemic last year. This means the rate of new infections reduced by 16% in the last 7 days, the first significant decline since the onslaught of the second wave. So on the big picture today, we will decode the current COVID situation in the country in terms of numbers. What do the falling numbers in active cases suggest? Is the worst of the second wave over? And what are the challenges that we still need to overcome to get past this deadly second wave of COVID pandemic? For this, I'm joined by two eminent panelists on the show who will be discussing with me all these aspects and much more on this edition of The Big Picture. So let me introduce our two distinguished panelists. I have with me Dr. Raman R. Gangakhedkar, Member, National Task Force for COVID-19, and Dr. C.G. Pandit, National Chair of the ICMR, and Dr. Girdhar R. Babu, Professor and Head, Life Course Epidemiology, Public Health Foundation of India. Thank you to both my distinguished guests for joining me on The Big Picture today. Dr. Gangakhedkar, let me begin the program today with you. So for the first time during the course of the second COVID wave, we are seeing a declining trend in the number of new cases. The country registered a fall in cases in the week that ended on Sunday. What does this indicate? Should it be seen as a sign of the second wave slowing down?
It's very difficult to gauge on the numbers that we are getting as of now. No, when you see a decline, the decline that you are seeing is in probably a reflection of the decline of infection in population dense areas of urban cities. No? However, we have no clue whether a similar decline is being seen in rural areas. And all of us must remember that 72% of the population of India tends to live in rural areas. And this time, actually, the outbreak is as severe in the rural areas, mainly because they were not population dense, they were not so exposed, because they were vulnerable far less compared to urban setups. Now, that's one thing which I would say. Second thing which we also need to remember is, even if you look at the overall figures, there are certain states where the peak doesn't appear to have come because they started reporting pretty late. No, if you think in terms of states like Andhra Pradesh, you look at Karnataka, they are still in the rising mode, despite the fact that you might see a small decline here or there. These blips are reflection of number of tests that you have offered in that particular state. What kind of tests that you have offered? Are those rapid antigen tests, or what is the proportion of rapid and RT-PCR tests as such? So I would say that it is heartening that there appears to be a decline as of now. I would not treat even hospital beds are available as a very important phenomena, because it is only a reflection of urban areas. In rural areas, you don't have so many hospital beds. So the issue may not be as much reported. So essentially, we should still wait before we say that the wave is on a decline, rather than thinking ahead of time that perhaps it may also be seen similarly in other areas or other states or even in rural areas.
Absolutely. Dr. Babu, so what Raman Gangakhedkar says is that, is very, very significant, even though the numbers look heartening in some states, but in rural areas, in the other states, what we are seeing is the pandemic looks like it is shifting. But if we talk about these states which bore the brunt of this onslaught of the second wave, initially, if we talk about Maharashtra, the national capital, then Uttar Pradesh, also Chhattisgarh, Punjab, these are states that have now begun to witness a downward trend. So if we talk about these cities, the major cities, the states that bore the brunt of the onslaught of the second wave, can we say that considering all these factors, that the positive rate has dipped down, the number of active cases have come down, can we say that the peak of the second wave, at least in these areas, is over? Or just like Dr. Gangakhedkar, you also believe that it's too early to say whether these numbers will remain down?
In India, I don't think there are many people who will disagree with what Raman Gangakhedkar sir will say, and his explanation is absolutely right. I'll just extend the inferences. This is law of averages. When you take maximum number of cases from the urban areas and mostly from largely high population density areas, then once the surge decreases in those areas, it will influence on the overall numbers. I'll give you another bit of statistics. In the last 30 days, there is 100% increase in 50 districts, and most of them are rural. And to just pick up 3 districts, Tapi in Gujarat has 180% monthly growth rate. Coorg or Kodagu in Karnataka has 204% increase. Mansa in Punjab has 211% increase. And if you were to look at the quantum of the monthly growth rate of the cases, the smaller districts are having a quantum twice or thrice the number of cases that they used to have. A small district like Mahendragarh, which had only 22 deaths in 4 weeks, now it has 78% increase in the death. Same in Coorg, there's 100 Coorg or Kodagu in Karnataka, there's 100% increase in mortality. What is the summary? The summary is that when you are looking at larger numbers coming from high dense areas, we are missing what's actually happening in a smaller district where the infection might be doubling, deaths might be doubling, there is poor health system, there is not timely referral, there are not kind of oxygenation facilities that we see in metros. So therefore, we should not be confused by the overall decrease in positivity. And most importantly, my last point in response to this question is testing is decreased all over the country. And this is as if sort of a uniform thing all across. And in this, while the surge in cases is happening, this will actually confuse the signals even more. So testing has to be improved.
Okay, Dr. Gangakhedkar, so of course the worry, and both of you rightly point out, is that looking at the health infrastructure in rural areas, and all of us know there is very, very little testing that is happening. There is no proper record of deaths also. And the pandemic, there is a large fear that the pandemic in these areas may rage even without reflecting in the official statistics. So what should be the strategy going forward to prevent transmission, or at least initially to get an idea of the spread of the pandemic in the rural areas of the country?
See, I'm not interested in knowing the extent of magnitude as of now. We are already in second wave. The magnitude is large enough. Now, what we need to do is just try to push for preventive intervention strongly. That's the only way out. Ramp up the healthcare infrastructure strongly. Now, as we said, in rural areas, if the incidence is increasing, we will need to change our strategy a little bit. No, the strategy will have to be, differentiated care models. How am I going to apply in rural areas? Are there places where transport systems are good? People can be transported to higher referral facility if they need. I need to keep my ambulances ready for transferring such patients. I need to ensure that a large majority is retained in the rural area if they don't require any admission, mainly because the hospitals, even district hospitals, are smaller in size compared to what you see in metropolitan areas. If they get flooded, with people who don't require hospitalization, it will also be a setback for the entire outcomes that could come about because of these issues. I think what is we learned one lesson at the end of the first wave. Until the time everywhere we don't see reports of this infection, please assume the virus is there everywhere. Keep on intensifying your interventions, whatever best interventions you have. And in any case, if people say that investing in health infrastructure is going to take time, but I also know one thing, that our investment have been so low that whatever investment goes in, it will pay you in the long run and short run for sure. So why should we hesitate? No, we have to keep on ramping. That's the only way that I see.
Okay. Dr. Babu, let me bring in you here back on the rural areas and the need to ramp up infrastructure there. That is something that the Prime Minister has also emphasized in his last meeting with the states. He did emphasize that they must urgently ramp up health infrastructure in rural areas. But the concern is, and as Dr. Ganga Khetkar points out, we're already amidst this second wave. It has wreaked havoc in big cities where comparatively the health infrastructure is much, much better. Imagine the plight of rural areas where even the primary healthcare centers are not functioning. Do we have the time to actually, now begin ramping up infrastructure while there are people already being infected, already losing their lives, and their deaths are not even being accounted for?
No, I think this is the most important question I have faced in the recent times. This is the chicken and egg story, right? When people say that rural areas don't have infrastructure, can we step up now during the pandemic? My answer to that is you had a very brilliant question, and this is the dilemma of every policymaker. My answer to this is, if we don't do even now, anyway we are not doing at any point of time. Why is that we are not doing even when there is a crisis? And when there is a crisis, if we don't fill up the vacant positions, if we do not show the intent to strengthen the public health system in the country even now, when will we do? That is the first question. Second, any kind of temporary hiring of people or short-term measures are going to not help the people. Why do people come to health system? They come because they trust in the system. They know, if they know that one person comes only for 2 days just to test us and give some medicine, and after that the person is going back, why will they trust the system? We need to get the community to trust the system. For that, we need permanency of solution. Final thing is, currently, I have one more problem of when the Prime Minister is seeking everybody to please report the data correctly. He had made repeated pleas, and then the first thing he said last year was, if there is a second wave, it's going to be devastating. Prevent it from coming. That's what the plea last year was. Just a day ago, he said, report the data, do not hide the data. But then when I see that a death is not reported, test is not done, cases are not reported, I feel we are not getting the message clearly. The first thing we need to do is, we need to change the culture that it's okay to report, because reporting death is respecting the entire life of the person. Similarly, to get tested is not a taboo. It's not something of stigma. We are going to give you treatment, and that kind of perception difference has to come in the community. This will come only when we make a lot of efforts to empower and educate and be working with the community. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. So, in summary, what I'll say is, we have to ramp up the entire infrastructure, most importantly, the human resources, fill all the positions now, because this is not the last wave, this is not the last pandemic. We can't have temporary solutions for the chronic neglect of public health for decades together.
Absolutely. Dr. Ganga Khetkar, coming back to the point that, some areas we are seeing are reporting a decline. The most important factor which is being attributed towards this, decline is that these states, if we talk about Maharashtra, if we talk about Delhi, Chhattisgarh, they have largely been under lockdown for the past few weeks. And perhaps that is one big factor that reflects in this, reversing trend in the number of positive cases. But if we talk about the shifting pandemic to rural areas, is this solution workable? And if not, what should be the immediate priority for all states to effectively contain, which is number one should be number one on their to-do list, to effectively contain the spread in rural areas?
See, I would answer it a little differently. One thing we know for sure, that calibrated lockdown is the only answer if you are going to apply any kind of lockdown in given circumstances as of now. General lockdown, we know all across what happens is that was seen in the first wave itself. 15 days before the start of the lockdown and 15 days later, if you compare any parameter, all of them perhaps showed that there was a negative outcome with respect to lockdown. Now, what does this essentially mean? Lockdown is one way to restrict movements. But one thing which we have to realize is, if I'm going to push some punitive or restrictive measures to the population and try to make those people adhere to those, these are not going to have a lasting impact. Now, what would have a lasting impact is mobilizing the community. Are we sure that in rural areas, even if tomorrow things were to happen differently, are people aware so much about COVID? Are they knowing or even adhering to COVID appropriate behavior? Because we have not made all those extensive efforts through civil society. I think if you have to reach larger population, you have to go through civil society. If you look at even vaccination rates, vaccinations in rural area are far lesser because their risk perceptions are low. Now, if my risk perception is low, there is nothing that I am going to do, neither take vaccines nor believe that this is a serious threat and adhere to COVID appropriate behavior. I think lockdown is not the answer. We have learnt about lockdown. Lockdown, you can go for a calibrated approach, especially if the size, or if you are looking at larger clusters of infection. But if it is spread infection, let's say it's a small village where 100 people are living, what is lockdown going to do? If the numbers are going to increase there, if there are seeds of this infection across, spread in a sparse manner, you will find that lockdown doesn't have any impact, because they will still have a smaller cluster around them of their own family members, and the numbers would keep on increasing. So I think what we need as of now is try to mobilize civil society, try to mobilize resources. Every village has Nehru Yuva Mandal, the women's self-help groups. I think it is time we need to extend this particular approach, add one more layer of community mobilization. Only then we will be able to not only reduce the number of cases, but sustain them. Please remember, our culture is of culture of fatalism. Culturally, what do they say? We tend to be fatalistic very easy. Every time when we think, we say, if God wills, no matter what I do, He will take me, or He will ensure that I don't survive. Now, if we don't try to change that through community mobilization, it is actually a reflection of ignorance or poor scientific literacy. Now, if we don't make difference, it will continue. No, it's this disease or tomorrow some other disease. Now, if we want to break that chain of diseases and bring health back to India, then in those cases, it's important that community mobilization receives primacy along with all intervention measures. Because I was not saying
this is very, very important if we are staring at future waves, because all of the scientists are predicting that this is not the last wave that we are going to face. So it's going to be very, very vital for our preparation for future waves as well. Dr. Babu, another concern, apart from the pandemic shifting from urban localities to rural areas, remains the increasing number of deaths in the second wave. That is a very, very big area of concern. Our daily deaths are still hovering around 4,000. Just the last week, the average was around 28,000 deaths. How can this be brought down?
Yeah, what has happened in the second wave is, and we have recognized this very early on, maybe early February, mid-February is when we started discussing regarding the faster transmission of this current wave. In Maharashtra, when it was spreading faster, we knew as epidemiologists there is something which is out of our own expected trend, because the number of cases that we were seeing is large. Later on, the genomic sequencing proved it. This is nearly 1.5 to 2.5 times highly infectious based on the evidence from the UK and elsewhere, the B1617 strain. In addition to that, there are other strains of variants. So what has happened now? What we would have seen, the number of cases spread over a period of time. We had no lockdown, we had no restrictions, people are freely moving. That resulted in a very short span of time. So instead of seeing, let's say, assume 1 million cases over 5 months, now you see 1 million cases in a day or two, for example. Then what's going to happen? Even if you say 5% of this sudden surge in cases is going to require oxygen support, we only have limited capacity. People keep saying that, the health system capacity needs to be ramped up. I agree, we need to ramp up everywhere. But in urban areas, especially in metros, where they were already done 2 times more number of capacity compared to the first one, there too it could not be handled well, mainly because the load was immense. So how do you prevent mortality? And there's also a lag time. If there is a surge in case, some people admit and they get discharged later or they succumb later. And afterwards, if the beds are occupying, people in mild and moderate respiratory distress, they are also pushed into severe and then they succumb. So number of deaths are going to more because when you have large number of cases. To prevent this, efficient triage mechanism to ensure that only the deserving people enter, efficient exit from the hospital. That means whoever is getting well, even if they are relatively needing some support, they should be stepped down to a different center. Finally, empower the hospitals, give them as much resources as they need, having a voluntary effort, as sir said. We need to have voluntary workers, civil societies helping community and the hospitals.
Absolutely. And it is a fight that we have to fight unitedly. Only then we will be able to beat this deadly pandemic. Dr. Ganga Khetkar, coming back to you, pandemics, of course, are very, very uncertain. We've seen it's difficult to predict as well. We were taken off guard when the second wave hit our country. But then we do read about assessments, a lot of studies that talk about when the pandemic will peak, by when it is expected to subside and so on. So allow me the liberty to ask for your opinion on when do you think the second wave in the country will end? Will it be a sharp fall, just as we witnessed a sharp surge in this wave, or a slow and protracted one that could take months together?
I know one thing for sure. If you just see a sharp fall, then you're not accounting for the rural population, so which is 72% of your population. So when you see such a kind of a peak, it essentially tells you that your access to different services is far better in certain areas and it's not so in other areas. Now, when will this come down? I would actually imagine that what should happen nationally or even at a state level, our states are also pretty big. No, so essentially, even in those areas, you should get a plateau. No, you should not get a peak and then it comes back, because peaks are representing access to healthcare services. No, if we were to interpret it that way. Now, given that, what I would say is perhaps second wave should also take another 2.5 months time to come down, if it was an ideal kind of a setup where people have access to everything almost equal. If not, no, we cannot dream of a equality coming up only during this pandemic time. But if they had some kind of graded access, at least, you might find there would be a plateau. It will come down in another 2.5 months time. Now, what would happen? My belief is you would perhaps require longer time now to get a third wave. That's going to give us much better period, unless a variant is likely to challenge you, which has a very high transmission efficiency, and perhaps it is more closer to a newer. So to my mind, we will spend longer time at the baseline. Now, maybe it could be around 4 to 6 months time, and then it may come up. But if everything is well, if the virus doesn't mutate so rapidly, perhaps the third wave can be smaller, but the way the variants are developing, we do not know. We will be put at threat not by the variants that we are seeing in our country, but by the time our outbreak tends to go down, there will be some other countries where it will intensify, and that particular strain could come to us. So it's very difficult at this juncture to predict how things will happen with respect to second wave and third wave. But there's only one dictum that I could say. Let's assume till the time the world says there is no coronavirus, no outbreak has occurred, assume we are continuously vulnerable and try to do what are known as the best intervention measures, try to follow them. That's the only way out.
Dr. Babu, coming back to you for one final remark. So 3 challenges there put forth by Dr. Ganga Khedkar. Dealing with new variants, because that, of course, is a very, very big concern, even in the coming times. How to sustain the decline, the little, reversing trend that we are witnessing in some areas in terms of number of active cases and the positivity rate also dipping. So the second challenge would be how to sustain this decline. And the third, dealing with a potential third wave if that happens. So what, according to you, should be our best strategy to deal with all of these challenges and be prepared?
Yeah, I think this is the time we need to institutionalize the COVID-19 response. The reason I say that is, I see too many people, too many organizations, and too many pieces of jigsaw puzzle which are scattered all over. The state has to be the complete owner of the program, and there are only 2 strategies of doing it. One is a very aggressive containment strategy, which means if outbreaks like Maharashtra and Kerala were to be the first thing to be noted in third wave, we should be able to prevent the transmission right there. So that's what we mean by aggressive containment. And this cannot be happening only at the national level. This has to be very local. And for that, the right question to ask is, how many cases are you detecting? If you're not detecting enough, that means you're not doing good enough of a job of doing surveillance. That's the one approach. Currently, the culture is different. If you have fewer cases, you will be lauded. And if you have higher cases, then okay, there is a problem. So that's the approach to tackle COVID-19. The second approach is vaccination. Again, we need to be increasing the speed at least to 10 million doses per day, at least to cover the vulnerable people before December. And December is around when we can have the third wave. So if you are able to cover the vulnerable and step up the aggressive containment measures, even if you don't cover everybody with vaccination, we can reduce the total number of deaths and the hospital admissions in the vulnerable age group. I'll give you an example of United States of America. If you look at their 4th wave, it is very small peak. The deaths are fewer, hospitalizations are fewer. They had 4 waves. And if you compare the earlier 3 waves, they are devastating. So I don't want to see a devastating third wave. For that, we need aggressive containment and a very faster and wider vaccination coverage.
Absolutely. Vaccination seems to be like the best option in first tackling with the second wave, the ongoing one, and then preventing a third or a fourth wave in the country. So time is running out. With that, I'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you once again to both my guests for joining me on the program, putting across your thoughts before us and our viewers, helping us understand how to deal with a potential third wave, prepare ourselves, and also continue to maintain COVID-appropriate behavior, because that is the least that we as citizens can do. So thank you once again to both my panelists for joining me on the program, and thank you to my viewers as well for your time. Take care of yourselves and your families, and see you again tomorrow.